Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button right now, because today's video is not about a race, not about a title, and not about an on-track mistake. It's about something far bigger happening behind the scenes of Formula One, and very few people have truly noticed it. Formula One has just wrapped up another historic season. Record-breaking audiences, new brands entering the sport, young drivers becoming global stars. But while the show keeps growing on the outside, internally the sport is dealing with a silent moment of tension. A moment of rupture. A moment where certain historic figures are starting to cause more damage than value. In recent days, several stories that seem unrelated at first began to surface. Drivers speaking more freely than ever, teams imposing stricter internal rules, structural changes for 2026, and an explicit concern with image, social media, and public narrative. And all of this points toward one uncomfortable question that no one has asked out loud yet. Does Formula One still have room for characters from the past? Because there is someone extremely powerful, extremely influential, who spent decades shaping careers, deciding destinies, and saying exactly what he thought without apology. Someone who embodied the harsh, raw, and often ruthless essence of Formula One. But now, that way of operating has started to create a problem too big to ignore. The season is over, Lando Norris is already champion, McLaren celebrated, and yet the paddock did not go into vacation mode. Quite the opposite. The last few weeks felt like a reckoning. Oscar Piastri, for instance, chose to break his silence and publicly defended the so-called papaya rules. He stated that internal team orders were essential to prevent conflict, protect the team structure, and ensure the championship fight didn't spiral into personal warfare. That is not a minor detail. That is a symptom. Formula One is openly acknowledging that it can no longer allow drivers, team bosses, or powerful figures to say whatever they want, whenever they want. At the same time, Pirelli revealed the 2026 tires, confirming that the new era won't be just technical. It comes with a mental reset, smaller cars, simpler concepts, fewer gray areas. A full philosophical reboot. Every time F1 resets itself, it also reviews who leads, who speaks, who decides, and who becomes a liability. Meanwhile at Ferrari, Fred Vasseur did something once unthinkable. He gave Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc permission to openly criticize the team. All in the name of transparency, narrative control, and institutional health. None of this is random. All of it is part of the same quiet shift. Another strong sign of this new Formula One emerged far from the main cameras, Valtteri Bottas' first day at Cadillac. This is not about Bottas returning to racing. It's about the kind of project entering the sport. Cadillac doesn't want chaos. It doesn't want scandals. It doesn't want unchecked personalities. It represents a corporate, regulated, image-conscious Formula One. One where every public statement made by someone powerful becomes a branding risk. And that naturally creates friction with historical figures who thrived on confrontation, blunt language, and psychological pressure played out in public. This tension became impossible to ignore in recent weeks when young drivers started becoming targets of aggressive online abuse. Not for what happened on track, but because of narratives created off it. The internal question became unavoidable. How long can Formula One tolerate words being used as weapons? And beyond that, who is held accountable when things spiral out of control? Those questions are not asked in press conferences. They are asked behind closed doors. If you want to understand what truly happens beyond polished interviews and official talking points, subscribe to the channel and hit like now. Here, we connect the backstage decisions, the silent power shifts, and the real forces shaping Formula One's future long before they become official headlines. As the season officially closed, the FIA and Formula One management finally began addressing a problem that had been growing quietly for years, but exploded in 2025, the loss of control over narrative and fan behavior. What changed everything was not a crash, not a title fight, and not even a controversial penalty. It was the realization that words spoken inside the paddock now carry consequences far beyond it. In today's Formula One, a single statement from a powerful figure can instantly turn into mass harassment, coordinated attacks, and real threats, especially against young drivers. This concern intensified after multiple incidents throughout the season where drivers became targets online for things they did not control. Internal reports indicated that some teams had to actively protect their drivers from social media exposure after races, not because of sporting mistakes, but because narratives had been pushed irresponsibly. At the same time, the FIA started reviewing how its own regulatory tools were insufficient. Penalty points, fines, and reprimands deal with on-track behavior, but they do nothing against reputational damage, public outrage, and sponsor anxiety. And sponsors are now a key factor. Formula One's commercial landscape has changed. New manufacturers, new markets, and new investors demand stability. They do not want their logos associated with controversy that escalates into hate campaigns. They want controlled messaging, accountability, and immediate corrective action when something goes wrong. This is why, behind the scenes, meetings began to focus not on freedom of speech, but on responsibility of influence. Who speaks? How they speak? And what happens after they speak? Suddenly, certain figures who were once untouchable became discussion points. Not because of performance, but because of risk. And in this new Formula One, risk is no longer tolerated just because someone has history. Formula One is entering a phase where evolution is not optional, it is enforced. The 2026 regulations symbolize much more than new engines and new tires. They represent a structural transformation of the sport's identity. Fewer gray zones, more centralized control, and clearer chains of responsibility. And this transformation extends to people. Inside the paddock, a growing divide has become obvious: teams, drivers, and executives adapting to modern communication, and a few historic power figures who simply did not adjust their tone, their language, or their awareness of consequences. For decades, part of Formula One's mythology was built on confrontation. Brutal honesty. Psychological warfare. Public pressure. That style once produced champions. But today, the same behavior threatens the sport itself. The difference is amplification. In the past, a controversial remark lived in newspapers or television clips. Today, it lives forever, multiplied by millions, detached from context, and weaponized by fans. And when that weaponization targets drivers barely in their 20s, the sport has a problem. What makes this moment different is that Formula One leadership finally acknowledged it. Internal evaluations reportedly identified repeated patterns, statements followed by harassment spikes, online threats, and intervention requests from teams. At that point, the issue was no longer personal. It became institutional. The sport was forced to ask an uncomfortable question. Is preserving legacy worth damaging the future? This is not about canceling personalities. It's about compatibility. Modern Formula One demands restraint, awareness, and discipline not only on track, but in words. And when someone repeatedly acts outside that framework, the system reacts. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But decisively. And once Formula One decides something no longer fits its direction, history shows it does not hesitate for long. If you followed this story up to this point, subscribe to the channel now. What comes next explains a lot that hasn't yet been said publicly, and it will shape the paddock for years to come. We've reached the final point. Throughout this entire video, we talked about shifting mentalities, image control, generational change, and responsibility in public discourse. We talked about protecting young drivers. About teams regulating behavior. About a Formula One that no longer accepts verbal chaos. Now, the name must finally be said. Formula One is dealing with the confirmed departure of Helmut Marko from Red Bull. This is not a romantic retirement. It's not a purely personal decision. It's a consequence. The comments involving Kimi Antonelli, implying deliberate race manipulation, became the breaking point. They triggered abuse, persecution, and even threats. And that crossed a line the modern Formula One will no longer tolerate. Internally, the message became clear. The sport's image matters more than any historical figure. Marko was an architect of champions. A kingmaker. A symbol of a ruthless era. But Formula One has chosen a different path. More controlled. More corporate. More aware of the power of words. And perhaps the harshest message of all is this. No matter how big your legacy is, if you don't adapt, the sport moves on without you. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and stay with us because this transformation is far from over.